Hi, we're back again with the CSRM Sports Outreach Ministry Training Series.
Great, yeah, it's great to be with you, Chris.
Chris Levette again with Jonathan Detweiler.
Yeah, and this is our second session of our topic, which is organizing, the practical aspects of organizing sports ministry.
Yeah.
And the last session, we really were focusing on a biblical example, the example of Nehemiah, and the things that he was committed to and how we can bring those same commitments into our sports ministry. And we talked about focusing on prayer, depending on God. We talked about the importance of planning.
Yeah.
But then we talked about really in the end not giving up. Because if God calls us to do this, we need to stick in there. We need to do our best and but allow Him to give us the victory.
Yes.
And so we're moving on today, though, to our next session, which we're calling Striving Together. And this is a reference, again, back to a previous session that we did. So we hope you've seen those. If you haven't, then go back and check out the session on missional sports communities. And that's where the term striving really comes from. But again, this is Chris Levette.
Yep.
And he is the vice president of the CSRM board, and with many years of practical experience in sports and also doing some sports ministry himself.
Yeah.
And then I'm Jonathan Detweiler, and I work with Uttermost Sports, which is also a ministry working around the world, specifically in the 1040 window. But our heart is to equip and train you and sports ministers, people, church pastors, even athletes, to get a better vision for what God is calling them to do. So we've also been talking about this model, and this terminology actually comes from Campus Crusade, which I was involved with Athletes in Action for many years. But this pyramid I adapted from sports ministry, from youth ministry into sports ministry. And so we're not going to go into the specifics, but just to bring this back to your attention, because this is what we're striving for. We want to win people for the gospel. We want to find those persons of peace who God is already working in, who He's placed eternity in each one of our hearts. So these are people who are looking for have an awareness of God and are looking for Him or wanting to find more about their purpose in life. But then we want to build them. We want to help them to discover and come to know Jesus so that they can become a follower of His, so that then they can be sent as a multiplier and begin winning, building, and sending. And to be honest, Chris, it's exciting for me to have you here because you are an example of this. Why don't you share just briefly a minute of your own testimony of how you experienced this whole, even this pyramid taking place, how you were one for the gospel. Essentially, you were discipled and built up, and now here you are as a leader in CSRM.
So initially I started playing in a local church sports ministry. Greg, the CSRM executive director, was actually the leader of that league. That helped build a foundation in my faith because as a young kid I liked playing basketball, so I just happened to stumble upon a local church sports ministry league. Through that, the foundation of my faith was built, and then I had some rough times here and there where, my faith wasn't as strong, but ultimately that foundation that was built in that league remained, and through other impactful people in my life, Greg actually continued to be impactful. I became stronger in my faith, ended up playing basketball in high school and in college, and now I have actually come full circle, and I've actually coached in leagues and camps at the church that I played in when I was, 6, 7, 8 years old.
Yeah, that's great. So Chris is really an example of the impact, of course, I think that all of us strive for as we're using the tool of sport, to use it to invest in people's lives and then allow them to grow through the struggles, through the ups and downs, but ultimately to become more mature in their faith, to become a real follower of Christ, and then a leader in your own environment, in your own culture, and in your own calling, to be able to serve God effectively.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's fair to say that without that sports league, I may or may not be a Christian right now.
Wow.
So that was that impactful.
That's a powerful statement. But I think it also reflects on the value of sport in a person's life, but is really a reflection of the value of sport in our own cultures, in our own communities.
Yeah.
Because no matter what country you're watching this in, sports is a language that people are speaking and listening and involved with. And so it becomes a bridge that allows you to connect with the person and ultimately build a relationship and then share the gospel so that they can be built up and then sent as a multiplier to start reproducing and building into the lives of others.
Yeah.
Great. So as we move forward, though, I want to remind you of why striving is the term that we use, because strive comes from the word agon in the original languages of the Bible, the Greek. It says a gathering, a contest, a struggle as an athletic contest, or a struggle in the soul. And the Agon Institute is something that CSRM is working on to help sports people who want to go further, even to get a master's degree through a seminary that there's a partnership with. So I encourage you to check that out. But it's a term that speaks to my heart, and it also brings us back to what we were talking about with Nehemiah, because anything that you take on that is worthy is going to have a cost.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a lot of effort and commitment and perseverance. And these verses that we talk about here in Philippians 1:27, where Paul is saying, contend for the faith of the gospel, or in 1 Timothy 6, fight the good fight of faith, take hold of the eternal life through which you were called. So to contend or to fight the good fight, that's the image of striving, of facing the opposition, but not moving on. I mean, not getting discouraged, but moving on and moving forward. And so it's critical to the foundation of what we're doing in sport and sport ministry.
Yeah, it makes me think of how Paul calls us to work out our own salvation with fear and trembling.
Right.
And that's something that you're going to have to strive and persevere through, and that can be applied to your sports ministry.
Right, that's great. So then what we've done is we take each one of these letters from Strive, and we've given some points to them that help us to move forward. So we're going to start with these because this is supposed to be practical. So what does it mean to start with God, to pray and fast and plan? What does it mean to target specific neighborhood and so on, and where do we go from there? So we want to take a moment and just look at each one of these and give you some steps to move forward. But how do we begin to strive together? Well, it starts with God, a God-given vision and mission. And these are some things that are a part of that you have to have communion with God, that relationship with God, which we've been talking about, that ultimately that calling flows out of, because God has impressed upon us His great love for Him and called us to be His children, and now He's saying, I want you to go and I want you to serve Him. And then it comes out of passion and a perception, a passion for what we have. You love sports.
Yeah.
Your passion flows out of your love for sport. Perception comes out of what you see around you.
Yeah.
So the desire to meet the needs of the people around you who love sport but who don't know Jesus.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is, as you do, you've got to consider, okay, what is my availability, and am I committed to fulfilling this task? And often I say you have to be fat. You have to be faithful, available, and teachable.
Yeah.
And then it comes with merging this mission and vision together. And so that's critical. But then moving from that, after you've merged this vision and this mission, and you receive this calling from God, where do you go? So we say next that the T is you want to target a specific neighborhood or group or even person. Maybe you're not involved at a larger level of sports ministry yet. You're an athlete. So target someone who God is placing on your heart, who He wants you to use to reach. So who are, in the broader sense, who are the people in your community? What are their needs? What are their sporting interests? And remember, it's important to be perceived as a partner as an integral part of what the church ministry or as a whole is trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
As a player, to be perceived as what the coach is trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that's important when you're seeking out this neighborhood or this group that you want to try to impact is to keep in mind that you might not impact the first group you try to. Because Paul got chased out of lots of cities, but he still did great work in those places, and he faced a lot of struggles and people that were against him in those situations as well.
Yeah, very good. So if you're true to that calling, then you don't lose that calling when difficulties come.
Yeah.
Or when God changes you and takes you in a different direction. But there's also some things, that as you're targeting the neighborhood, you need to build a ministry team around you. So you need to recruit 3 to 5 people who can be a part of this team, who you can move forward together with. And so that involves maybe some training and some vision casting with this group.
Yeah, because we'd all like to think that we're superstars and we can do everything ourselves, but that's just ultimately not true at the end of the day. And you're going to have a much better impact and be able to cast a wider net if you have people also casting your vision and your mission into the community.
Great point. And they're using their gifts and talents to also accomplish the vision and mission, hopefully, that you've been called to together. And so then the last thing there that is develop a prayer team.
Yeah.
Not only you be praying and fasting and making sure you're hearing from God, but ask other people around you and even develop a prayer team of 3 to 5 people who you can pass requests onto and stand with you as you move forward.
Yeah, and we saw, 2 sessions ago how powerful prayer can be and how Nehemiah used it to have an impact. And ultimately, through his consistency and just love of God and wanting to pray to God, they've rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem in 52 days, which is kind of astounding.
And I think prayer had a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
And so that's, as you target the neighborhood, do that. But then you've got to communicate the vision and mission. And so who do you do that to or with? So you want to communicate, first of all, to the church leadership. If you're not a pastor yourself, then I'd encourage you to share that vision with your church leadership. And of course, we hope that they will buy in, and you can use some of the materials that we've already talked about, the biblical foundations and those kind of things, to be able to help you with that. But maybe you're also just starting out, and so in that case, of course, you've got to communicate it to your ministry team one way or another.
Yeah.
You've got to make sure you're on the same page. And then if you're a part of a body, well, as you know, you're already, as a believer, a part of the church, the universal body of Christ. But if you're a part of a local body, you want to be able to communicate to them as well, so that they get involved and they can begin to use their talents and gifts.
Yeah, and having a clear, concise, well thought out vision and mission is crucial, because a lot of times there's a misconception amongst lead pastors or heads of a church that you're just going to roll a couple soccer balls out on a field and the kids are going to kick them around for a couple hours.
Right. So you've got to tell them what it is that you're doing. That we have a phrase that we say, we are using a game, but we're not playing a game.
Yeah.
Because eternity is at stake. So this is what you want to communicate.
Yeah.
That this is not just about a game, but it's something broader than that. So that's why we say you've got to educate them, you've got to inform them, you've got to motivate them. An example of doing this is what we call our Sports Challenge event. And if you'd like to know more information about this, you can contact specifically the CSRM website, or contact Chris or myself, because we have it's a program that you can use to train and equip and educate your church about what you're doing, so that then they can get involved, and also helps to enlist some volunteers. So
yeah, and another thing that the people at your church might want to see is some sort of progress in this, and the Sports Challenge event will also help you be able to go back to them and say, here's some of the fruits of our labor.
Right, and at that event, you're sharing the vision, you're sharing testimonies, you're having some fun competitions that are involving the people who are there, and it really helps for them to see that it's not for them, but it's for wanting to reach out and serve others. So that's the targeting the neighborhood that comes, and those are some steps that you have to think about as you're not only thinking about the group you want to reach, but how to get others involved. And then we come to the R, which is now reach out through a specific event or program. So as you do this with your ministry team, identify the resources in your church and in your neighborhood, and then you design the program specifically around what you want to accomplish, and you plan for this concept, evangelistic discipleship. Not just evangelism, not just discipleship, but evangelistic discipleship.
Yeah, and this is something that you're going to know best, because you know your community and the people that live in it and what they would be the most receptive to. Maybe a camp or a league or whatever.
Exactly. And so what we've done is we've got this program matrix, and the point is not where the checks are for you, because it may look different in your neighborhood and community, but the point is that you start to think about which program best suits the ministry goals that you want to achieve in the areas of evangelistic discipleship and ongoing ministry. Exactly what you're talking about,
right,
Chris. So on the top of the graph, you have the strategy or the program. I mean, you have the different levels at which the strategy or the program invests in the neighborhood or the community. And going down the left side, you have the specific program. So, for example, you see sports camp, and then the question is, does that allow me entry into my neighborhood at a comfortable level? So is that easy? Is that hard? And when it says low, that means it's more difficult. When it's high, it said it really allows you an entry level into your neighborhood. And then group sharing, that's like in a large group. Does it allow you to share your testimony in a large group?
Yeah.
And again, this depends on your country, what's allowed. If you're in a country that's more difficult for believers, then of course group sharing is not even an option, no matter what.
Right.
So you don't have to consider that. But personal sharing, does it allow you to really engage in a relationship one-on-one? And maybe a point here is if it's a one-time event, you're going to have personal sharing, but it's not going to be as intense as an ongoing event or activity, which is why you might consider doing a league as opposed to a clinic or a sports day or something like that.
Right. And one of the things I think you want to keep in mind, too, is you might have a vision to have a large sports ministry. Mm-hmm. But in the near term, you might want to think about, well, what are the fastest ships to the shore? How can I actually get some people involved? Because you're going to need more people the bigger your ministry grows. Exactly.
And so as you think of these other categories, is it something that's ongoing? Is it something that really allows you to move towards discipleship? And if it does, then it's a kind of a build level program as opposed to a win level program. Does it allow you to expand your leadership base by giving more people responsibility? What is the involvement of the church or other believers? Does it require a lot of people, or can you do it with one or two people? How does it serve other strategies? So, for example, how can sports ministry come alongside other things that maybe your church or your group is doing, like a homeless feeding program? Then you can do sports. Or often in Africa, I see medical clinics that are set up in a village, and you have sports ministry that comes alongside and plays with the kids and gets the people involved while they're waiting in line for some kind of service or something.
Yeah, and I think a more Americanized version of this is how children's ministry and sports ministry should really be unified.
Exactly.
100% of the time.
Very good point. Very good point. And so that's something to think about. And then the last one is resource level in time, people, and materials. Does it take a lot of resources to do it? And if you have a lot of resources, well, then you can do some more of these things. If you don't, then you have to be more creative. But don't make excuses and say, this is what I don't have, but take what you have and use it. So again, this program matrix is not meant to be exact for your culture and your community, but the idea is that you take these things and the ways they engage the community, and then you consider what you want to do in order to be most effective.
Yeah.
Okay? So then as we go forward, how do we strive together? You invite people to join.
Yeah.
You reach out. So you focus on the win level. Be bold, clear, available, and accessible with the gospel. Make the most of every opportunity. Focus on relationships. Keep your eyes and ears open for those persons of peace, because at the win level, that's what you're doing. You're looking for ways to engage with people's lives so that then you can invest in them and help them along in this evangelistic discipleship. It's a whole picture.
Yeah.
So reach out and whatever event or activity you're doing. But then validate your presence by establishing a missional sports community. So now you focus on the build level. Make use of those, remember, Barnabas, Paul, and Timothy relationships that naturally exist through your sports and recreation activity and ministry. And remember how those relationships are built naturally into often a sports program. So as a lead director has people under him,
Yeah.
then they can be his Timothys. And as the coaches who are under the sports director have their players, then they can become a shepherd to those players.
Yeah.
So, and then begin this discovery process with your person of peace and their circle of influence. So engage them in a way that allows them to be discipled to become a follower of Christ. Don't expect them to raise their hand and make a profession of faith right there, although sometimes they might do that.
Yeah.
But really find the people who are interested and then engage them in a way that allows them to move forward. That's why we call it this discovery process. And then finally, expand your ministry as you train and develop leaders. Focus on the send and multiply level. Delegate responsibility. Become a permission giver. And I think that's what happened for you.
Yeah.
That Greg began to say, hey, Chris, I trust you. You become a leader now. Here you go. You can be a coach in our program. You can. And so he became a permission giver, and you stepped in.
Yeah.
And became a great leader, or becoming.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't know if somebody's going to be able to swim until you throw them into the pool.
Right. And again, so people progress up this pyramid at their own level, at their own rate. And so there's no set standard that says, okay, after 2 weeks, you know you're going to reach this level of leadership.
Yeah.
So begin to look for new avenues of outreach and start discovery groups. And we'll talk more about those discovery groups coming up in the next session. So gentle warnings, pray and follow God's leading. Start at the win level. Don't give up. Gradually expand and stay faithful to your vision and mission. And what do you see? Where is your heart? Where is your faith? That brings us back to a previous session as well, to keep a perception of what God is doing in and through your life, in and through your ministry, and create your plan by thinking small before you think big.
Yeah.
So, lots of stuff, but here's where we want to give you your assignment as we finish up this session. Pray and ask God to help you to find a balance between reality and faith as you strive to dream big for God. And so the question is, how are you striving to plant multiplying missional communities through sports? Fight the good fight of faith, agone. Take hold of the eternal life to which you were called when you made your good confession in the presence of many witnesses. And that's our hope for you. That's our prayer for you. So there's a lot of information here. If you didn't catch it all the first time, we invite you to watch it again, or to slow it down and pause it and really take good notes, because these things are critical, and I think ultimately if you can apply these things, you'll be successful.
Yeah.
So, any closing thoughts?
No, I'm looking forward to the next session.
Great. All right, thanks for joining us. Here is the contact information that you have. Check out our websites, and if you have any questions, please let us know. But thanks for joining us, and we're coming up with our third topic, our third session in our 8th topic. See you then.
See you then.